A girl sang on the street every evening to pay for her mother's. But when a passing millionaire. The streetlights flickered to life as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. On a busy city corner, amidst the noise of honking cars and hurried footsteps, a soft, soulful voice pierced through the chaos. It belonged to a young girl, no older than 16, standing beneath a flickering lamp post. Clad in a faded dress and worn-out sneakers, she held a battered guitar close to her chest. Her voice carried a mix of innocence and strength, singing melodies that tugged at the hearts of those who paused to listen. Every evening, without fail, she would take her place on that very spot. A small cardboard sign at her feet read, "Singing for my mom's treatment. Every little helps. Thank you." The passers-by were often a mix. Some dropped coins with a quick smile, while others barely noticed her presence, but she never seemed to mind. She sang with a passion that came from somewhere deep within, her eyes closed, as if the music was her only escape from the harsh reality she faced. Her name was Mia, and she had a story that few knew. Life hadn't been kind to her. Her mother, her only family and greatest love, was gravely ill and needed expensive treatment they couldn't afford. Without anyone to turn to, Mia turned to the one thing she knew, her voice. She sang every evening, hoping to collect enough to pay for another week, another day, another chance for her mother to get better. Some nights were harder than others. There were times when the chill in the air bit through her thin clothing, or when the exhaustion from the long days made her voice falter, but she never gave up. Her determination was unshakable, fueled by the hope that her efforts would one day be enough to save the woman who had sacrificed so much for her. One evening, as Mia strummed her guitar and sang a hauntingly beautiful ballad, something unusual happened. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb nearby. The driver, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, stepped out, his sharp gaze scanning the street before falling on Mia. He stood there for a moment, his expression unreadable, as her voice filled the air. The man was no ordinary passerby. His name was James Sterling, a reclusive millionaire known for his sharp business acumen and an air of mystery that surrounded him. Despite his wealth, James had a reputation for being distant and detached, a man who rarely showed emotion. But that night, something about Mia's voice stopped him in his tracks. He watched her intently, as if he were trying to understand the story behind her songs. The raw emotion in her voice seemed to strike a chord with him, stirring something he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, James didn't care about the meeting he was already late for or the string of phone calls he needed to return. He simply stood there, captivated. When Mia finished her song, she opened her eyes and noticed the man standing just a few feet away. His presence was intimidating, but there was something curious in the way he looked at her. Not pity, but something else. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp bill, dropping it into the small box beside her. But it wasn't the amount that caught Mia off guard, it was his words. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Mia hesitated for a moment before replying, "Mia." James nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer before he turned to leave. "You have a gift," he said over his shoulder, disappearing into the car that sped away seconds later. Mia stood there, bewildered. It wasn't unusual for people to offer kind words or encouragement, but something about this encounter felt different. She couldn't shake the feeling that this man's brief appearance in her life meant more than she could understand at that moment. Little did she know, James Sterling was not the kind of man to forget something or someone that left an impression on him. That night, as Mia counted the money she had collected, she thought of the man's piercing eyes and his cryptic words. She wondered if she would ever see him again. What she didn't realize was that James was already planning something that would change her life forever. But what could a millionaire possibly want with a street singer? And what would this chance encounter mean for Mia and her mother's future? The next morning, Mia woke up to the faint light streaming through the window of their tiny apartment. The air was cold, and the heater had stopped working weeks ago. She glanced over at her mother, who was asleep on the worn-out couch. Her breathing was shallow, and the once vibrant woman now looked fragile, her strength drained by the illness that consumed her. Mia's heart ached, but she pushed the feeling aside, as she always did. There was no time for tears. As she got ready for the day, her mind kept wandering back to the man from last night. His words echoed in her head. "You have a gift." She couldn't understand why they stayed with her. People often complimented her voice, but something about the way he said it felt different, like he saw something she couldn't see herself. Shaking off the thought, she picked up her guitar and headed out. Meanwhile, James Sterling sat in his sprawling office, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. His mind kept drifting back to the girl with the voice that had stopped him in his tracks. He wasn't one to believe in fate or chance encounters, but something about her had moved him. He had built his fortune on instincts, and those instincts told him that Maya was special. James picked up the phone and made a call. "Find out everything you can about a street performer named Mia," he instructed his assistant. "She sings near 5th and Main in the evenings. I want a full report by tomorrow." His assistant, used to his peculiar requests, didn't ask questions. As the days passed, Mia continued her routine, unaware that her life was slowly beginning to change. The people on the street started to notice her more. Some stayed longer to listen, while others shared her story online. Her name began to spread, though she had no idea. Her focus remained solely on her mother and raising enough money for the next hospital bill. One evening, as she finished her set, a woman approached her. She was well-dressed, with an air of authority, and introduced herself as James Sterling's assistant. "Mia, Mr. Sterling has taken an interest in your talent," she said, her voice polite but firm. "He'd like to meet with you. Would you be willing to come to his office tomorrow?" Mia froze, unsure how to respond. Her first instinct was to decline. What could a man like James Sterling possibly want with someone like her? But there was something about the assistant's calm demeanor that made her pause. Maybe this was an opportunity she couldn't afford to ignore. After a moment, she nodded hesitantly. The next day, Mia found herself standing in the lobby of a towering glass building. She clutched her guitar tightly, feeling out of place in her simple clothes amidst the polished floors and expensive suits. A receptionist guided her to James' office, where he greeted her warmly. "I'm glad you came," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I wanted to tell you in person how much your music moved me. You have a rare gift, Mia, and I believe it deserves to be heard by the world." Mia was taken aback. She had spent her life being overlooked, struggling to make ends meet, and now this man, a stranger, was telling her she had something special. James continued, "I'd like to help you. I can arrange for you to record your songs, perform on bigger stages, and reach an audience far beyond this city. But more importantly, I want to ensure your mother gets the care she needs." Mia's heart raced. It sounded too good to be true. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. James hesitated, then spoke with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Let's just say your voice reminded me of something I lost a long time ago. Someone I cared about deeply. Helping you feels like the right thing to do." Though she didn't fully understand his motives, Mia couldn't deny the glimmer of hope his words gave her. After some thought, she agreed to his offer, but on one condition: she wouldn't accept charity. "If you help me, I want to earn it," she said firmly. James smiled, impressed by her determination. "Fair enough. We'll make this a partnership." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Mia recorded her first song in a professional studio, and James's team worked tirelessly to promote it. Her music began to gain traction online, and soon she was invited to perform at local venues. Every step of the way, she thought of her mother, who cheered her on despite her frail condition. But as Mia's star began to rise, so did the challenges. The sudden attention brought scrutiny, and people began to question James' involvement. Some accused him of using Mia for his own gain, while others speculated about his motives. The whispers reached Mia, planting seeds of doubt in her mind. One evening, after a particularly exhausting performance, Mia confronted James. "Why are you really doing this?" she demanded. "People are saying you're just using me to fix your image or make money off me." James looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Mia, I can't control what people say. But I promise you, my intentions are genuine. Whether you believe that is up to you." Mia wanted to believe him, But the weight of everything, the pressure, the doubts, the fear of failure, was becoming too much. She began to question if she had made the right decision and whether this path was worth the cost. As the tension grew, so did the stakes. Her mother's condition worsened, and Mia felt the crushing burden of time slipping away. The conflict between her rising career and her personal struggles came to a head, leaving her at a crossroads. Would she trust James and continue to chase the dream he had promised? Or would she walk away from it all to focus on her mother, risking everything she had worked for? The answer seemed just out of reach, and the weight of her choices loomed heavy. Little did Mia know, the next turn of events would change everything, forcing her to make a decision that would define not just her future, but her very identity.